People of Tolkien's generation had a problem identifying evil. They had no difficulty recognizing it, they had to live through it. But the puzzling thing was that this seemed to be carried out by entirely normal people. And indeed, Tolkien, who was a combat veteran, knew that his own side did things like that too. The nature of evil in the 20th century has been curiously impersonal. It's as if sometimes nobody particularly wants to do it. In the end, you get the major atrocities of the 20th century being carried out by bureaucrats. Well, the people who do that kind of thing are wraiths. They've gone through the wraithing process. They don't know what's good and evil anymore. It's become a job or a routine.
Season 2 is here. You can tell because people are talking about it, though I use the words people and talking very loosely. The algorithm has decided that the Rings of Power is a hot topic, and the establishment media has doubled down on its angle. 2 years ago, those of us who dared criticize Rings of Power for its lack of respect for the source material, the poorly crafted story and characters, and the addition of modern-day political allegory, were branded patently evil by the showrunners. Now, the bot farms and shills across social media swarm to prop up this revisionist history, unfolding as hidden hands desperately try to control the narrative. The media cycle has decided that Rings of Power wasn't that bad, and that it was just that far-right fanbase review-bombing the show unfairly. No one, in the 2 years between seasons, talked about it much at all. There was no buzz, no speculation, no cult fanbase spreading the word. It was basically forgotten as soon as the last episode aired. You'd think a show with $1 billion budget would have some staying power, but the Rings of Power vanished from public consciousness. That is, until the run-up to its second season, where there was a sudden tidal wave of Rings of Power fan accounts, all of which are completely legitimate. You'd be crazy or paranoid to suggest anything else. Rings of Power was, of course, given a fair chance. From its announcement to its release, it never, ever showed any understanding of Tolkien, his world, or his fans. And if it was genuinely good, none of this pointless fannying about would be necessary, would it? Rings of Power would be there, in the ether, being good. And it's not. And now Season 2 is upon us. And it is clear the problems of the first season, from the inconsistent characterizations to the fundamental misunderstandings of the source material, have not been addressed. I never thought they would be, personally. Part of me thinks that this show is now deliberately being written this poorly to give people something to react to. The audience is small enough that a decent percentage of the viewers are probably watching just to critique it. Perhaps if Amazon can classify this as a parody, they'll be able to option a few more recognizable names and characters from the books without Warner Brothers suing them. Who knows? But this show is legitimately one of the most bizarre things I've ever watched, where things are simultaneously happening all the time, and yet nothing ever feels like it happens ever. I had a lot of gripes with the show, as you can well imagine. Too many. So instead, I will focus on the 3 things that really bothered me most. There is a balance in 3, after all. First of all, Sauron. This show has made a habit of altering key elements from Tolkien's lore, turning Sauron from the Dark Lord of legend into a sympathetic figure. The prologue this season focuses on Sauron and how he became Halbrand. Sauron is mean to the orcs, and he hurts their orc feelings. This leads the orcs to brutally Caesar Sauron, but instead of killing him, this merely destroys his physical form and forces him to flee and reform himself. This process is roughly based on the lore, but whereas the implication is in the books that this is a slow spiritual process, in the Rings of Power he becomes a slime monster. And once this slime monster has ingested a centipede, a rat, and an old lady, he's a man again. A different man, for some reason, but a man nonetheless. And now he's sad, because everyone was mean to him and that. So he pops back to Mordor before it was Mordor, finds an old man who speaks fluent platitude, gets convinced to go on a boat ride, the boat sinks, Sauron steals the old man's sigil crest thing, and then escapes on a raft, where he luckily meets Galadriel, who just minutes, days, weeks beforehand jumped out of her ship to Valinor into the middle of the ocean and decided to swim back. where she then assumes Sauron is the king of the Southlands because of that old man's crest he stole. And wait, was this his plan? Did Sauron plan this? Is this the writer's idea of a master manipulator, someone who just does random shit and then has everything work out for them by accident? This revisionist take on Sauron is symptomatic of the series' broader issues, a tendency towards modernizing characters and themes in ways that detract rather than enrich the narrative, either deliberately or accidentally subverting the whole point of the story. This leads smoothly to my second biggest gripe: the orcs. Firstly, I have an issue with orcs betraying Sauron in the first place, let alone betraying Sauron and winning. Morgoth created orcs, corrupted and tortured elves and men, and made them to act as an easily subjugated army. Orcs live in a perpetual state of fight or flight. They have little by way of willpower, they hold nothing sacred. In fact, they actively detest beauty and art and creation. They see it as a blight on the beautiful mud-brown layer of chaos and filth that accumulates wherever they go. They follow Morgoth and later Sauron because they fear them, yes, but also because they're given free rein to slaughter and gorge and war to their heart's content. You see, the orcs look good. They sound good. They look right, they walk right, they even smell right. But this scene here, it's only quick and maybe nothing comes of it at all. But here we see an orc family. I shouldn't have to explain why this is so ludicrously dumb, but here we go. The moral problem Tolkien had with orcs was never the idea that they might be nice if they were just shown a bit of kindness. Not at all. Orcs actively despise kindness. They see it as weakness. They scoff at elves and men when they're shown mercy, as it's alien to them. Let's be clear. In orc circles, if there happened to be a harsh winter, guess what? They'd eat their babies. They're more like a pack of hyenas than a civil community, except worse, as they don't even have loyalty within the pack. They are constantly betraying one another, falling to infighting, and the reason for this is clear. Morgoth didn't corrupt them so they'd become another sentient, civilized race on Middle-earth. They are a means to an end. And once the world is conquered, if they happen to make themselves extinct through wars and infighting, so be it. But apparently in the Rings of Power, orcs are just misunderstood. They just want to burn and pillage and eat man-flesh in peace, raise their little orc families with an orc daddy and an orc mummy and an orc baby. Orcs, apparently, don't want war.
We are safe here. We have a home. Must we go to war again?
Shut your mouth!
All right, Bob. Come
Shut your filthy mouth!
There was room to explore the culture of the orcs. It could have been harrowing and awful to see these little orclings running about. We could have seen some elven human reactions to these children that are so far removed from the children they'd be familiar with. Violent, feral little monsters, all reflex and reaction, that grow up too quickly and have a startlingly low survival rate. What would an orc child actually be like? It would raise some interesting questions, but as always, they decided to go with the most obvious, shallow interpretation they could, just as they did with Anatar and Celebrimbor. How they've written Celebrimbor, who is more Celebimbo now, is what has really irked me most this season. So far, anyway. Here is the master smith of the elves, Lord of Aregion, Feanor's grandson, reduced to a bumbling, closeted English professor who can't even design a working umbrella. He is easily fooled by Sauron when Halbrand knocks on his door and says, "By the way, all those guys over at Linden are totally bitching about you." "No way. They aren't, are they?" "Totally. And I bet Galadriel told you not to trust me, right?" "Why, yes, she did." "Don't listen to that frigid bitch. She's just jealous or some shit." "No way." "Yes way. Now, which handsome, super talented elf lord is going to help me forge some more magic rings, eh?" "Is it me?" "Oh, and so clever too." "Aw, shucks." The weird, underlying seduction energy they're going for. Celebimbo all flustered and baffled because this young, handsome man is being ever so nice to him. The master manipulator strikes again. And all it took was a few compliments, a bit of reverse psychology, a blonde wig, and for Celebrimbor to be a gullible old flirt. Once again, we have multiple examples of shamelessly repurposed dialogue, scene after scene with lines ripped straight from the movies. It's like they write a first draft, scan the movies for a scene that is at least a little bit similar, and just go, let's do that. Desperation is getting more and more obvious as they fling more and more shit against the walls, hoping they can just wow their way through Season 2 on spectacle alone. Look, Ents! Trolls! Old Man Willow! Tom fucking Bombadil! And all the while, young Gandalf, being all young and not knowing his mission and being very Seamus Finnegan with his magic spells, is having trouble settling into the world. Goodness me. It must be tough being an immortal guiding spirit shot down to Middle-earth in an asteroid, learning to walk and talk and do all his spells for the first time, like a fawn hobbling along fresh from the womb, helped along by Frida and Pamwise. And once again, they eat the bugs. Needless to say, none of this is canon. The decision to bring the Astari into the Second Age is a poor one to begin with. To give them amnesia, to make their magic so unimaginatively practicable. Magic is incredibly subtle in the books. Rarely are there flashy theatrical incantations. These aren't Hogwarts wizards. They're Astari, emissaries of the Valar. They're angels. And they aren't really old men in silly hats. They don't really need a walking stick, and they don't really age. These are guises, chosen partly by them, partly by the Valar, to give an unassuming air. The idea that Gandalf had to learn to be Gandalf is, in my view, ridiculous. Just as it's ridiculous that Tom Bombadil, the famously impartial, carefree woodland spirit, is now sensei to young Gandalf's son, waxing philosophical on and off. Far to the east in Rhûn, fighting these guys in plastic masks who serve some other nameless wizard they call, unironically, the Dark Wizard. And then there are the West Country desert-dwelling stores, the Ent and the Ent-wife popping up for a second for zero consequence, Isildur getting stabbed in the thigh, played for lols. The fact Gil-galad, Galadriel and Elrond play out this buddy cop drama, where Chief Gil-galad of the MEPD Linden Precinct doesn't approve of Detective Galadriel's methods. She's a loose cannon, an elf on the edge with nothing to lose. She plays by her own rules, but by God she gets results. Partnered up with this white-bread, straight-edged newbie, Elrond, a stickler for the rules, who always does things by the book. He's got book smarts, you see, while she's got street smarts. And fuck me, I think they might even learn a few valuable life lessons along the way. And there's more. The way Arondir holds his bow, the way the dwarves never change their clothes, the way Numenor has had 12 minutes of screen time and 4 hours of content. The fact the elves barely speak Elvish to each other, the fact elven military ranks work just the same as ours and use the same names, and they don't even use them in Elvish. Waldreg, who created Mordor, was murdered in the first couple of episodes. Bronwyn dies off screen. The fact Tom Bombadil is clearly going to give Gandalf his hat. The fact they keep persisting with the wizard mystery despite not having the license to use the characters' names. There's this.
Sauron used me, and under his hand I was played like a harp to a melody not of my choosing.
There's this. There's that.
You're meant to leave it in.
Was I?
Yes, whenever you're stabbed, you're meant to leave it in.
I've never been stabbed before.
Oh, neither have I.
There's this weirdo.
Istar will surrender to me. Because if he doesn't, I will slaughter the halflings he calls friends.
I could go on and on and on, because it's all so weird. It's all so weird and it's all so wrong, in equal measure, weird and wrong. Despite the considerable budget and resources at their disposal, 60 million per episode, The Rings of Power feels ephemeral, unable to ignite sustained interest or discussion beyond its immediate release. In the end, The Rings of Power might be remembered more as a cautionary tale than a seminal work in its own right, a testament to how not to adapt revered source material, destined until the year 2030, when all of this unpleasantness can be put behind us, to be little more than a footnote, to become the entertainment equivalent of flying ant day, a brief nuisance in the summer, a bit gross and uncomfortable, but ultimately harmless. And much like watching seagulls tripping their nuts off on those ants, there's a certain grim amusement to be found in the fleeting spectacle.